Hello everyone, I'm Goyal, a first year PhD student at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and today I'm excited to talk to you about our work SLM-Mod, Small Language Model Surpass LLMs at Content Moderation. This work was done with my collaborators Xianyang, Yilan, Ishwar, and Kaustav. Imagine you see this comment on Reddit. Given the two rules A and B, how do you think it would be received in various communities on the platform, such as NBA, college basketball, or legal advice? As you may have guessed, this comment is a clear violation of Rule A, and moderators of all these communities will likely remove this comment. Now, how about this comment? Did you watch the NBA game yesterday? In a community like NBA, this would receive a lot of attention and lead to a lot of discussions, and similarly in a community like college basketball. But how about a community like legal advice, where people could still love NBA, but Rule B of the subreddit clearly states that no off-topic comments are allowed? A moderator of this community would therefore actually remove this comment, as it could derail the conversation. What we just saw were the two types of content moderation tasks, which includes toxic content detection, such as profanity, hate speech, and bias, which has been the focus of the NLP community for a long time, and rule-based detection, which involves taking into account community-specific rules and implicit norms to arrive at a moderation decision. This is the category that needs more attention, as it is a key component of content moderation, and it will be the focus of this talk. Researchers have recently proposed to use large language models for content moderation, as they can identify contextual violation patterns that go beyond simple profanity and hate speech. Prior work has shown that API-gated LLMs such as GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 show promising performance in content moderation tasks and can also enhance transparency by providing explanations. However, we identify some key limitations of using LLMs, in that they lack the ability to be meaningfully adapted to community-specific preferences, as they can't be easily fine-tuned or continually learn over time. They also undergo frequent updates that would lead to unexplained changes in moderation outcomes, which is not desired. So how do we deal with these challenges? Recently, small language models have been on the rise, as they can perform at par with LLMs on zero-shot tasks in various domains such as translation, coding, and reasoning, and further have the added advantage of being open sourced and easily adaptable, providing a great scalable alternative to LLMs. But how do they actually perform on content moderation? To find out, we set out with 3 goals for our work. First, we wanted to understand how SLMs with less than 15 billion parameters compare to LLMs on content moderation tasks. Next, we wanted to identify what are the key trade-offs in using SLMs versus LLMs and identify the appropriate use cases for each for moderation teams. Finally, we wanted to understand what are the key implications of our results for AI-assisted content moderation. Our task setup involves an incoming comment, say from the subreddit Change My View, the preceding context on which the comment was posted, and the rules of the subreddit. We then use a language model to predict whether this comment should be removed or not based on the provided rules. For SLMs, we use 4-bit quantized versions of Llama 3.18 billion, Gemma 2.9 billion, and Mistral Nemo Instruct, and for LLMs, we use GPT 4o, 4o Mini, and Cohere's Command R+. Finally, we use LoRa fine-tuning for SLMs with 8,000 samples for one epoch and evaluate it in a zero-shot setting. And for the LLMs, we use an off-the-shelf zero-shot and few-shot in-context learning approach. We use a comment removal dataset from Reddit and test all models on 2,000 comments from each subreddit. We use 15 topically diverse subreddits of varying sizes, which means we have 15 fine-tuned SLMs. And for evaluation under a balanced edge distribution, we use accuracy, precision, and recall. And for an imbalanced edge distribution, we use the AUC score. On balanced edge distribution, we find that in terms of accuracy of predicting moderation outcomes, SLMs outperform LLMs by 11.5% on average across all subreddits, with the best SLMs being Mistral Nemo Instruct and the best LLM being GPT 4o. The subreddit where the SLMs and LLMs showed the best performance were Change My View and Movies respectively. On recall, SLMs outperformed LLMs by 25.7% on average. However, on precision, SLMs underperform LLMs by 4% on average. And we therefore see that SLMs are more accurate than LLMs at the expense of overflagging comments. However, in the real world, the proportion of violating comments are far from balanced. In order to test these models on a realistic distribution, we use 3 levels of 1%, 5%, and 10% to label comments. We picked the subreddits where the SLMs performed the best, which was Change My View, and the worst, which was Ask Reddit, and picked the best model in both categories. And we observed that SLMs still show superior performance in terms of AUC scores at various distributions mimicking the real world. Finally, we wanted to see whether giving the LLMs 2 or 4 short in-context examples would lead to an increase in performance. However, we found that ICL only partially helped LLMs improve their content moderation performance, and that too unpredictably. Now, fine-tuned SLMs perform great, but you must be wondering that having to fine-tune separate SLMs for each subreddit seems tedious, and we thought so too. So we explored a new evaluation setting. Until now, we were in an in-domain setting where, for example, we fine-tuned an SLM on games, and we're also testing on games. What we wanted to do now was to use the model we fine-tuned on games to not just test on games, but also on other subreddits like NBA and movies. So we ran cross-domain experiments, out of which I'll talk about the results for 3 target subreddits: movies, Ask Science, and IMA in this talk, while the other 12 subreddits were our source subreddits. And so before we jump into the results, why do we expect this to work? Well, prior work has shown us that communities have shared norms and values that govern them, and therefore we should expect that similar content may get removed across communities with shared norms. Once again, on the cross-domain setup, we see that Mistral Nemo Instruct showed the best performance. And while these numbers lag behind the in-domain numbers, perhaps surprisingly, they still outperform the accuracy that the LLMs achieved. Among the cross-domain subreddits, the hardest one was Science with 58% average accuracy, and the easiest one was Movies with 68.6% accuracy. So we find that cross-domain moderation using SLMs has great potential and may even outperform LLMs that were used directly for that subreddit. But one question that remains is, how does a moderator identify which cross-domain model would provide the maximum performance? We hypothesize that the cross-domain performance could be correlated to the subreddit size, description, and rules of the subreddit. We then ran column-wise t-tests for non-correlation on the relative size matrix and pairwise cosine similarity matrices, and found only 2 significant positive correlations, each for description and rules, and none for relative size. And as a result, we find that it is difficult to identify the best cross-domain model for a particular subreddit in a principled manner. So what do our results imply for moderation teams and the NLP community? Well, firstly, we see that SLMs provide a strong alternative to LLMs for content moderation and a cheap, scalable, and adaptable solution. Next, we also identified a key trade-off where SLMs have a much higher recall, which implies that they may be more suited as a triaging tool, as they can help moderators identify a large number of potentially violating comments, but not for automated moderation because the platform would not want to wrongfully remove a user's comment. Due to their higher precision, LLMs may be more suited for such a use case. Finally, we saw that cross-community moderation using these models holds potential, but it is not easy to identify which cross-domain model would provide the highest performance. This opens up questions about how we can quantify the domain gap to identify appropriate models, and whether we can build some mixture of experts framework to do cross-community moderation directly. And the second bit on MOE is something that we are currently pursuing and observe promising results. So stay tuned on our future work for this. Here are the references used in this talk. And that's it for my talk today. And I'd like to thank all of you for your time. Feel free to read our paper and reach out to us with any questions.